Good morning, everybody. My name is Anthony Miller. I have been a coordinator and facilitator for the program for the last decade. And before that, I actually am an alumni of the program. So I was in your shoes when I was a senior in high school. And I am now judging at the national tournament for the first time. So I'm really excited to be here with you all today. Thank you for having us. And thank you for all of your hard work and preparation. Andy, if you want to introduce yourself.
I'm sure. Hi, good afternoon. My name's Andy Levy. I'm a trial lawyer in Baltimore, and I also teach at both of Maryland's law schools, the University of Maryland and the University of Baltimore.
Oh, Susan, you're on mute.
Hello, sorry about that. Hi, I'm Susan Arnett. I'm a criminal defense lawyer in Honolulu, Hawaii. Just retired from the Public Defender's Office, and I also teach at the William S. Richardson School of Law at the University of Hawaii.
Wonderful. Okay, well, I will let each of you introduce yourselves to us, and please introduce your teacher to us as well, and then we can begin.
Hello, judges. We are the U4 representatives from Wauwatosa East High School, representing Wisconsin, the Wisconsin Wildcard team. We are coached by Mr. Taylor McDaniel, and my name is Aiden Anich.
My name is Julia French.
I'm Micah Korb.
And I'm Maddie Bartz.
Wonderful. It's nice to meet you all. Thank you so much for all of your time and preparation. We're going to begin with me reading the question to you all. Once I've read the question, you can begin as soon as you are ready on your own time, and the timer will start when you begin speaking. I want to make sure before we begin. Okay, Joseph had disappeared there for a second. I just wanted to make sure he was here to start the time. Okay. And the question is, it would be inconsistent with the constitutional separation of the executive and legislative powers to let the prerogative, pardon power, be exercised by the latter. What were the framers' reasons for giving the president the pardon power, and do you agree or disagree with them? According to the framer James Wilson, if the president abuses the pardon power, he can be impeached and prosecuted. Do you agree with Wilson? Why or why not? In your opinion, what constitutes high crimes and misdemeanors? You may begin when you're ready.
In 1987, President Ronald Reagan began the annual tradition of the turkey pardon. Modern presidents followed suit, granting 1 or 2 turkeys immunity during the hunting season. Some of these turkeys came in lovable pairs, such as pardoned turkeys Tater and Todd, pardoned by President Obama in 2016. Unfortunately, not every pardon has been as innocent and lighthearted as these. During the ratification of the Constitution, the Federalists strongly backed the implementation of the presidential pardon power. It was originally intended to serve justice and mercy, but has been so easily misused and led to tyrannical activity.
The primary intentions of the pardon power were to serve as a check on the judicial process and grant mercy to those wronged by our justice system. The Brennan Center for Justice stated, quote, "This power should be used more frequently as a vital mechanism of mercy, tempering the often harsh, racist, and inequitable effects of our criminal legal system," end quote. In some cases, the pardon has been used in the manner it was intended in the Constitution. For example, former President Obama issued 330 commutations to small, nonviolent drug crimes. These commutations alone represent the intended use of the presidential pardon. However, these singular acts of clemency do not speak for the history of the pardon usage as a whole.
At the Constitutional Convention, Virginia delegate George Mason argued against the presidential pardon when he stated, quote, "The president ought not to have the power of pardoning because he may frequently pardon crimes which were advised by himself," end quote, implying that the president may use the pardon to protect their own misconduct. Throughout history, we have seen this pattern as presidents have used pardons as a safety net for the wrongdoings of themselves, their friends, family, and colleagues. For example, in 1974, former President Nixon was pardoned by his successor, President Ford, after his involvement in the Watergate scandal. This is a clear example of the corruption of the pardon power and how it has become a free pass for people in power. Aristotle's rule of law states that no individual or organization is above the law and should be held accountable to the same set of laws. This is one of the primary ideals that our country was founded on, which in theory should include the president. The use of the pardon by presidents throughout history has been a direct violation of rule of law and is more trouble than it's worth.
When speaking on the corruption of the pardon power at the Constitutional Convention, James Madison admits, quote, "There is one security in this case to which gentlemen may not have averted. If the president be connected in any suspicious manner with any person, and there be grounds to believe he will shelter him, the House of Representatives can impeach him. They can remove him if found guilty. Although this check is valid, it has been proven not substantial. The president has the constitutional power to pardon whoever they choose, unless in cases of impeachment. Therefore, the only check on this power should not be to remove the president altogether. The president should be held accountable for their presidential actions, but impeachment is an unreliable and unreasonable check on a boundless executive power.
When the framers planned the system of impeachment, they left the requirements for impeachment purposefully broad to allow flexibility in removing a dangerous official. Enumerating a specific definition of high crimes and misdemeanors in the Constitution would establish loopholes for the president to undermine democracy without qualifying for specific standards of impeachment. We believe, however, that when evaluating eligibility for impeachment, a high crime or misdemeanor should be any action by a government official that threatens national security and public safety or obstructs the cooperative nature of government institutions and the people.
While many framers argued the presidential pardon power was his way to serve justice to those wronged by the judiciary, it evidently has become invalid in those intentions and has been used and has been taken advantage of by the executive. Repeated pardons have also contributed to the inefficiency of congressional legislation, as they tend to serve as a band-aid for larger issues. Using impeachment as the sole check on pardoning is insignificant and does not solve all-encompassing issues at hand. The exercise of pardons as a buffer for wrongdoings of political figureheads does not serve as a constitutional check on the judicial branch and will continue to grant the executive branch tyrannical power. This concludes our statement, and we are ready for your questions.
All right, thank you so much for that statement. So I want to just summarize this here and get a clear opinion from you guys. It sounds like you recognize a lot of the values of the pardon power, and some of the times it's been used very effectively. But it does seem like you take a strong stance that the pardon power leads to possible tyranny and a lot of corruption. So how do we handle this? I see two ways we could deal with this, and perhaps you guys have another suggestion. One is we just get rid of the pardon power completely because it's too dangerous. The other is that we try to put some sort of guidelines around it. If you were to put some guidelines around it, then I would like to hear what you think those lines should be. What is an acceptable and an unacceptable use of it, and how do we kind of do that in a way that is fair and we can determine on a case-by-case basis? It can't just be this ephemeral, like, well, sometimes it's okay, sometimes it's not, right? So what is your suggestions? If you were rewriting the Constitution today, how would you solve this problem?
I would say one way to amend Article 2, Section 2, Clause 1 of the Constitution under the pardon power would be to possibly add the terminology of nepotism and cronyism, speaking on friends, family members, and colleagues, as a lot of times presidents use that, their presidential pardon power in their own personal family and friends and colleagues that takes away from the original purpose of that pardon power.
Going off of my colleague, I believe another thing we could do is we could exclude government officials from the pardon power, because under Article 4, Section 4 of the Constitution, we are a representative government and they should be held to a higher standard of the law under our Constitution.
I also think that adding a executive council, which would consist of both the president and the judicial branch, would be a good way to check the presidential pardon power, because if both having a council that would all have to approve rather than giving the whole power to one person, and this was proposed at the Constitutional Convention, having an executive council.
Wonderful.
Does Congress have any, as written now, is the president's Article 2 power absolute, or does Congress have any Article 1 power to limit or regulate the pardon power?
Under Article 2, Section 2, Clause 1, it, in my opinion, pretty distinctly says that the president has the power to pardon anyone he would like. I don't believe that Congress has any ability under the Constitution to stop a pardon.
The only other limitation on the pardon power would be impeachment under Article 2, Section 4.
Does that mean that you, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead, Andy.
Susan, go ahead.
Oh, I'm wondering if you think there is no role for the judiciary in the use of the pardon power. In other words, you suggest that perhaps it should be limited to exclude nepotism or cronyism, but who would determine if that was what was happening? Do you have an opinion on that?
Well, I think in the cases such as nepotism, for example, if a person was to pardon their family member, it would be kind of clear that that's what their intention was. For example, Bill Clinton pardoned his brother. And I think that was just kind of a clear case of nepotism.
Well, let me follow up. You've criticized the pardon of President Nixon by President Ford, and President Ford was his vice president. But can you point to some benefit that President Ford personally got, or do you quarrel with his contention that he thought for the good of the country, the whole Watergate issue needed to be closed and allow us to move on, and that the pardon of President Nixon would accomplish that?
Looking long term, a lot of people did agree with the when Ford did pardon Nixon, but in my opinion, I believe that it was not right, because Aristotle's rule of law stated that no individual is above the law, and that includes the president. So, in my opinion, it was not really constituted, and it shouldn't have been in place.
But
It also goes into the whole idea of setting, because if then the rest of the country and presidents or people in power in the future see that get away with doing something like that, then you never know what could be happening in the future.
But obviously the framers disagreed that, it's one thing to say no one is above the law, but there it is. There the pardon power is. What is there anything gained by it? What was their thinking, and sort of why don't you think that promise was realized, as it sounds like you don't think it was?
Well, there were disagreements, like you said, among the framers. So Federalists such as Alexander Hamilton, who advocated for a really strong executive under Federalist Paper 70. He also talked about his want for that pardon power under Federalist Paper 74, but that does differ from the Anti-Federalists who were totally against that power, such as George Clinton under Cato 4, an Anti-Federalist paper, stated that he felt it would lead to a tyrannical and arbitrary leader. So they definitely had those differing views that kind of carried into how it affects today's society and political climate.
Yeah,
Joseph, do we have time?
Despite their difference in views, they didn't temper the power at all. Why?
Well, the pardon power is actually from the royal prerogative of mercy, as the framers really feared the judicial power that was vested in the British monarchy, as there was a lot of corruption with salaries and with the jury, and they feared it a lot, and that's why they put the pardon power in place, so that they could have kind of a safety net for that power.
Okay, I'd like to go in another direction for 1 minute here, because it sounds like you guys are talking a lot about how you think that we shouldn't have pardoned Nixon. We should be enforcing the rule of law here. How does that apply perhaps to the prosecution and the DOJ in cases where we're not talking about pardon, but Donald Trump, when he was running for office, one of his big platforms was lock her up. We're going to fully, to the full extent of the law, we're going to investigate and prosecute Hillary Clinton for the email scandal and any other corruption that happened there. And many people thought that when Joe Biden became president, that Donald Trump was going to either flee the country or be put in jail for a lot of things also, right? And in both of those cases, once the power shift happened, they said, it's not worth prosecuting this, let's move on. Do you think that that's a violation of rule of law? Do you think it's okay that maybe this isn't a pardon, but we didn't, actually investigate these fully? Is that an acceptable stance for the president to take or not?
I think that's a very difficult situation, because similar to the Nixon pardoning case, there was, because of the rule of law.
Go ahead and finish this, because I asked the question and it was the end of time. So.
Oh, okay. So because of the rule of law and everything, it's hard to put people above the law, but also a lot of times it is in the best interest of the country just to move on and have a fresh slate and not be worrying about all the things in the past. And so that is kind of a slippery slope to get on, because it's not as black and white as we make it seem.
Okay. Thank you all so much. That was wonderful. Okay, I think you guys did an incredible job today. You should all be very proud of yourselves. Your parents and your teachers should be very proud of you, and any coaches. I think that you guys were incredibly well prepared. You had lots and lots of supporting evidence and knowledge, both of the usage of the pardon power throughout history, but also of the reasoning behind it and the founding of our country and the ideals that shaped the way that we use these powers. And you were able to apply those. And you were able to have a very interesting intellectual conversation and see both sides of the issue and come up with some nuance. And I thought all of that was really, really incredible. Your prepared remarks were excellent. Honestly, I'm very, very impressed with everything you guys said today. And I thought I might be able to kind of get you there a little bit on having some level of like disconnect on some of your ideas with like, okay, well, we should use the pardon powers because it's a violation, or we shouldn't use the pardon powers because it's a violation of rule of law. But there's a lot of lines here. And I think you guys did a really good job of saying like, well, cronyism and nepotism is a limitation. The one place that I thought was a little bit weak, and to be honest, this is pretty difficult to come up with in a few minutes of time, is how do we actually enforce that? You know, definitely saying, well, Clinton pardoning his brother was obvious, but who makes that determination? Is it the judicial branch? Is there some new third party that we have to create that's impartial? Does this come from the legislative branch? It's really hard, and I don't think we have a great solution to it. But that's definitely somewhere we could continue to explore, because I agree with you that there does need to be some way to limit these powers, but who do we give that power to? It's important to recognize that the pardon power in the first place was a check on the judicial branch. So if you then give the judicial branch a check on the pardon power, then are you negating the check that we had in the first place, right? Just interesting things to continue to explore further, but I really enjoyed the conversation with you guys today. Thank you so much.
Susan?
Okay, I also greatly enjoyed your presentation. I thought you folks really had a handle on the issue. I appreciated that you were all participating. In fact, you know, it was clear that more than one person was ready to answer a question, you know, most of the time. Micah, I thought it was effective when you acknowledged that there were people who supported the Nixon pardon at the time, but why you now thought, you know, from your point of view, that it was not appropriate. I think you did a good job of supporting the positions that you were taking. It was really a pleasure to listen to your presentation. Very, very good.
I agree. It's great to have a presentation like this sort of early in the day, because it really sets the standard for the rest of the day. I loved the opening. Whoever came up with the turkey pardon, that, you know, bravo. That's really very effective. I don't know if we're going to hear about Tater and Tot later in the day, but we've now heard it, and I'm gonna remember that.
Absolutely.
But it wasn't, you know, just that. It was I really wish we'd had more time to talk with you guys about this. You really seem to know your stuff. The reference to not one but two Federalist Papers, and then the position of the Anti-Federalists, very erudite. I mean, just historically very well done. It really is odd. I mean, here you've got, you know, there was a great deal of disagreement over whether even to give the president this power, and then they had no problem in acting in derogation of sort of royal power when they wanted to. In fact, that was a good part of the Constitution. And yet when that push came to shove, they just put this absolute power in Article 2 and didn't even require, you know, confirmation by the Senate, as they could have, for example. So it's very peculiar, and but you guys gave me a lot of things to think about, and that's really, I mean, that's the acid test. So bravo to all of you, and to your teacher and your parents. This was a pleasure.
Absolutely. I would love to add just briefly, because it looks like we have a few minutes, that it is very rare that we come out of one of these frustrated that we ran out of time. Very often we either get a pretty good gauge of you know, where we are at, or we seem to kind of conclude the conversation, and it's impossible in 8 minutes to really thoroughly have this conversation. We all understand that. We don't expect we don't expect to come to any conclusions in 8 minutes. But the fact that I came out of this really wishing that we had another 20 minutes, half hour to talk to you guys is a really, really positive sign. There's very few teams that make me feel that way.
Yeah, can I just quickly add one other thing as a result of that, which is the one thing you need to be careful about, and this question in particular lends itself to it, is you need to be careful that your position isn't just whether you agree or disagree that a particular pardon should have been made, or if you'd been president, would you have made a different decision? That's not a very principled way, and you need to be ready for questions that ask you to sort of neutral principles that don't just depend on personal opinion in terms of what should or shouldn't be done.
And I think you guys did that pretty effectively.
I thought so too, and I learned something, well, more than one thing, listening to you, which is a joy when you're on the faculty. Good luck rest of the day.
All right.
Good luck and congratulations.
Thank you, judges.
Thank you, judges.
Thank you.